So there's a connection between loneliness and like heart disease, stroke, dementia, and also premature as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's insane.
So that's why I say the balance is important.
I want to know in your own experience, how would you differentiate loneliness and then also being alone?
Yeah, I think loneliness is when you're longing not to be alone. Feeling disconnected from friends, getting lost in social media, even like the idea of in their own homes and their parents being consumed with their own technology.
Right.
A lot of not sitting down at the table and eating dinner as a family, like that seems to be more rare. And so I think that fuels all of the disconnection.
I want to start here. And the reason why I want to talk to you about this is because I was hanging out with my, like younger cousins. They're all Gen Z folks. And I, just walked up to some random person, started talking to them. And for some reason, I noticed that they were like so weirded out that I did that. And then when we went back, I like overheard them talking to their mom, and they were saying, Ebrima was like talking to someone in IRL. I was like, what the hell is that? And later, I learned that means in real life.
Yes.
And to me, that just told me just the disconnection between our generation and the next generation, and the way that they're seeing social connection, especially in the real life. And I'm curious, like in your own profession, like how often do you see that as you work with kids? And I do want to go into the problem itself before, after your answer.
Yeah, I don't work a lot with kids, but I work with adolescents and then young
that's
adults.
Perfect, because they're technically like adolescents, which is between age 14 to...
We usually see up to like 12.
Oh, 12.
Yeah, start
Wow.
around 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess they're teenagers then.
I'll preteen.
So the question was like, how often do you see that in your online professions?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a part of all the conversations, to be honest.
Right.
That's feeling disconnected from friends, getting lost in social media, even like the idea of in their own homes and their parents being consumed with their own technology.
Right.
And a lot of not sitting down at the table and eating dinner as a family, like that seems to be more rare. And so I think that fuels all of the disconnection.
Right. And to me, it's like, loneliness is something that we all like experience all the time. But like what surprises me is like, especially the stats that we're going to talk about today, which, for reference will be in the post, in the captions, which is the epidemic of loneliness by the former U.S. Surgeon General. But like what surprises me, it's like how loneliness impacts our mental and physical health at the same time. And here are some stats that I got from that PDF. It says 1 in 2 adults in America are like reporting experiencing loneliness, especially the past 3 years. And also there's a connection between loneliness and like heart disease, stroke, dementia, and also premature as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's insane.
That is insane.
They're equating loneliness to that. And my question is like, what is the difference between loneliness and being alone? Because I have my own definition as I'm reading the PDF, but I want to know in your own experience, how would you differentiate loneliness and then also being alone?
Yeah, I think loneliness is when you're longing not to be alone. So the being alone is I can be comfortable, I can be doing what I want and being alone. But the moment that I long to be with someone else and no longer just by myself, that's when that loneliness piece kicks in.
Oh, wow. So they're like interconnected at the same time.
I think you can be alone and not be lonely. And so it's like, yeah, if you're enjoying what you're doing, what you're involved in, and again, maybe you are getting some level of connection outside of that alone time, but that it's that when you are alone, and I guess technically you can be in a group of people too and still feel lonely, but it's that moment when you don't feel connected, whether you're with someone or not, and you long for that.
Right.
And that's when the loneliness piece is.
Wow. And like in my own experience, because I literally bought a book that says quiet.
That's a great book.
I like to just be by myself.
I think I know what book you're talking about.
Yeah,
is it about like introversion?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great
it's
book.
like quiet and like a very long like subtext, which I forgot. But I love that book. And, I intentionally put it on my desk just so that people know. I was like, leave me alone, please. But like in my own experience, which is different from everybody's experience, it's like I describe loneliness as whenever, I'm trying to get to a place that I feel like my social, my social, like capital cannot take me to that space. And then I find myself in that. I find myself to be super lonely in that scenario. But then I also describe being alone as like, because I'm always around people, but which is not now, but like about a few years ago, I used to be surrounded by people, but I always feel alone because I see myself always trying to say something, but I feel like I'm not being heard all the time. So I don't feel connection with that group, even though there were so many people around me.
Sure.
And which is like so confusing because people will see my videos online back then. I used to have 50 or so many people around me, but at the core of it, I was always I felt alone because maybe, that's, it's not people, the people around me fault, because sometimes I tend to just be quiet and just let them just do what they want to do. And I will support that. But then I get lost in that. And then I get lonely, which we've kind of touched on in this podcast. But like, what do you have to say about that? Just that two differentiation in my own context, which can be different from what you see in your own realm.
Yeah, I think, being in a group of people, if you're not feeling connected to them, that can definitely breed the feeling of loneliness. And so then it's, I think, going back to, do you want to connect with this group of people? And if you do, then can you be a little bit vulnerable, more real in what you're sharing to where you feel like you are being seen or heard?
Right. And like all like like online, especially like interactions that happen online and offline, in today's age, and the way we use online is becoming like pretty much everywhere you go, especially online itself is telling you this is a safe space, the community. But a lot of people don't feel that. But there's a social element to that where, especially kids, for example, my, like cousins that are in their 14s, they spend so much time online playing Fortnite, which, I don't agree with because that's not how I grew up, but I'm trying not to, project my own fears and insecurities into how they live their life. But as a therapist and like working with, I guess, like adolescent, like how do you see that play out? When you hear them share their stories with you about being alone or just feeling loneliness. Yeah,
I think from some stories I have heard, that's where they do feel connected, is when they're playing online games with friends and they're talking as they're playing.
Right.
I think there should just be a balance of being able to take those same skills and applying them to real life. And so if you're connecting with someone because you're sharing about your day while you're also playing a game, can you not do that out in the community, playing a sport? Right? Or something to that effect, to where you're getting that same level of connection. It's just different. But I think when they get lost in games and they feel that way, they think that's the only way. And then it just increases their time into it.
Then like, what do you have to say about like screen time and people time? This is something I just made up as we were talking.
Sure. Well, I think screen time is going to be there, right? It's like we're in that technology. It's not going away. It's probably going to increase with AI, whatever that looks like. And so it's here and we can't. But also that's why I say the balance is important. Like my kids have always been involved in sports and they will always be until I don't get to make that decision for them anymore. But it's because like, they shouldn't be alone at home on a screen. They should be out with friends and being challenged by tough things that they have to overcome and all that. Right.
I'm going to challenge you here because I was also that kid where my parent, especially my dad, he's a very, like athletic guy. He got me into so many different sports, basketball, soccer, which I enjoyed doing all that. But then also like academics, I had to be perfect. And mind you, I grew up, which I've shared here, is like, I grew up in a family where my grandpa had, has 3 wives with 50 plus kids. Insane. So I have aunties and uncles that I'm still getting introduced to till today. My mom would just call me and be like, hey, talk to this guy. I'm just like, who is this guy? So some entitled dude like, hey, I'm your uncle. So it's like, I've always grown in a space where there was so many people around me, but yet I feel that sense of loneliness. But then at the same time, I was expected to do all of these things. I guess my question is, as a therapist, like, how do you, communicate to a child who find themselves in the situation where they're getting the people time and the screen time, but it's not necessarily, their, like decision. It's like they're not being heard at the end of the day. Yeah. Like, how do you help them identify that as a teen or like an adolescent or even like an adult? Sure. Because I know there are a lot of adults that are still, struggling with that.
Yeah, I think just advocate. So like if like, for example, using my own kids, if one of them didn't want to play this particular sport anymore, it'd be about having a conversation. Like I'm not the one driving what they do. It's just do something. And so I'll put these things in front of you and then you get to decide. But if there's ever a time where it's like, I want to switch or do something different, it's just learning to advocate because you should speak up about that.
Yeah. Well, in my case, I wasn't giving that chance.
Sure.
If you speak up, God knows what happened. So you just say yes and just do what you have to do.
So, but I guess if an adolescent came in and that was their reality is like, okay, so if you don't have any control or power in that situation, how do you begin to have open conversations to where you're not getting dysregulated? And it sucks because then that kind of makes them the adult to where it's like, I need to go to you in this calm manner and share something and hope that over time their parent's opinion changes. But in the parent-child situation, it's hard because ultimately a lot of the times power and authority can win.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, let's flip that. Let's say now you were talking to the parents. How would you communicate that to them? Because some parents are still growing to become parents still.
Sure, yeah.
With like kids, they're like young grown-ups that have the the opportunity to like raise their own, but still it's like they still struggle with that communication piece.
Yeah, we do that. We do sessions where the parent and the teen or whomever is in the session together, and the teen will have a private conversation and say, hey, we're going to lead you, kind of tee you up, and then we're going to let you lead with the parent. And then if it goes poorly, we're there to help intercept. But a lot of the times when there's a third party in the room, the parent's guard is different. And so then they can typically hear what the kid is saying better. And then we can then go in and validate that. And then as a unit, create a plan that feels like everyone, because a lot of the times the parents coming out of like, well, I didn't get this experience and like, they should be lucky they get this experience. And like, I'm doing this for them. Why can't they appreciate that? And it's like, that is all good until it's not. And so then it's been able to hear like, oh man, I love that you want to give your kid that experience, but are you listening to what experience they want to have?
Wow. And like, as we're talking to this, I want to, like transition to the actual, the groups that are more like impacted by this problem. Like according to the stats here, it says that young adults between 18 to 24 are the most lonely generation, which, the phone piece plays to it. I feel like maybe they don't have the balance between the screen time and the people time. They're spending way too much time on TikTok, and which I share this on TikTok, and hopefully they can watch this and get off the app and be able to go mingle and talk to other humans. But like, and then another group that is not much of that big, but it's single parents, like remote workers and caregivers, because those individuals are usually going to work, they're around people, but then they're also so alone, which I can relate to that. Like what would you say about that as a therapist, especially when it comes to single parents first, and then also remote workers?
Yeah, I think, with those and then even caregivers, I think part of it is that their level of responsibility has trumped any other need that they have. And so it's like, okay, what's the reality of where you are allowed to have outside relationships or a level of fun or enjoyment? Because a lot of the times it could be financial reasons, it could be scheduling reasons. And so it's like, well, I have all of these things that come first before my ability to do something I enjoy. And so it's like, okay, realistically, if that's the reality, is there any way to shift that to where it's not going to be balanced? Like that's real. That's true. And so maybe even just validating that for them, affirming that, but then say, is there any way to incorporate something or to enhance the relationships that are already around you?
And like, I want to, also like flip that, because I do have a lot of young people, especially on TikTok, that watch these videos. How can they have grace to their parents that are going through, especially in those categories, like single parenting and like remote workers and also caregivers? Maybe they have parents in those space that are, like working around the clock. Like, how can a child identify that and be able to see that and be like, oh, my mom is doing this. Maybe I should be a little bit more more like graceful and also be able to help a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the role of like other positive adults in their life, is being able to give a fuller perspective. Because sometimes, you know, when you hear your parents, you're like, no, whatever, what do they know?
Yeah.
But then when you hear it from someone who's like the identical parent but not your parent, it's like, oh, it's brilliant.
Right.
But yeah, I think those positive adults in their life, I think that can help. And then, I mean, I just think growing empathy as they grow too, I think helps.
Right. And like, you know, another thing that I picked up, because, you know, I do have like 6 younger siblings. I forgot almost how many of us are there, 8. But like the other 6 younger people, they age from 9 all the way to 23 or 24. It's been a while since I've checked in. But like one thing that I noticed in their language, and even to my cousins, you know, 2 of them, is that I noticed that they always say like, I'm fine, but I can tell that they're not fine. And then when you try to gauge a conversation, it's like, it's really hard for them to open up. Because at the end of the day, saying I'm fine doesn't necessarily mean that they're fine. But like, how can an adult be able to penetrate that barrier and actually have a discussion with their child or a cousin or, you know, like a sibling? Yeah,
I think that's where the indirect conversations are important. And so like I had mentioned, the kids are playing games, talking to each other while they're doing something. And so it's direct conversations can feel more intimidating.
Right.
And so it's, okay, let's go on a walk together. And then all of a sudden I'm not making direct eye contact with you, which feels less scary. And so you might open up more. Or, hey, let's play this game together. But it's kind of coming alongside of them, doing that quality time, and then allowing the conversation to flow from there versus a direct eye contact. Hey, tell me what's going on. And that could feel intimidating, or maybe they're feeling disconnected and don't want to go there. But if you spend time with them, then that may shift.
Right. And like, you know, another thing that I notice is like, you know, because I don't play video games at all, but every now and then I'll get bored and I'll jump on and I'll hear, you know, and this happened one time, like a little kid, just based off of his voice, you know, they were explaining just something that's happening in their life. And it was super like heavy. And then, you know, the moment he was done sharing, someone said something funny and everybody started laughing. And, you know, we don't know what happened to the kid. And I remember, you know, just, you know, I have my headphones on. I was like, ooh, like that was very like insensitive. But then, you know, it was like so many people, you know, you can't see their faces.
Yeah.
You don't know how old they are, how young they are. But that kid just logged off, and we don't know what happened after that. And I haven't, you know, like gone back to play. But like as a therapist, how can you, you know, like advocate to those scenarios where there's like young people that are playing video games and someone just randomly open up and then someone laugh and everybody laugh and then this person leaves, which, you know, there's so much stats around just like, you know, like suicide within that age group and them just feeling that bully online, just constantly getting feedback that either that's needed or not even warranted. But like, what would be your advice to a group of young, you know, like adolescents to be more mindful about things like that? Yeah,
I think it goes back to the conversations you have with them about how they notice that. And so if they were playing a game and someone shared something, it's not that you have to go deep with them, but it could just be about, oh man, that sounds really hard. I'm glad thanks for sharing. Right. And even the small comment like that, like it's not life-changing, but it could be because someone heard something, and an adolescent shouldn't be put in a position to be like, oh no, I need to make sure this person is okay, or how do I say the right thing? Because then that leads people to not say anything. Right. But it's if like you can validate in that moment, then you're recognizing and then being able to move forward. Right. But it's just noticing. So if I were talking to a group of adolescents, it's like, how do you notice that? And then how do you validate? Right. I like that. And like, even in my own experience, you know, I want to transition into like stigma because it plays such a big part. Because in my case, I have a big friend group. I've always had people around me, either back in Africa, whether I want it or not. People were always around me. And one of the things that I noticed when it comes to stigma in my own experience is like the fact that I always have all those people around me. It's really hard for me to tell someone else that I'm lonely. I feel alone because they're like, bro, like look around. Like, what are you talking about? And sometimes that can shut me off. And that's why I have the book called Quiet, because I'm, you know, so now I try to be mindful of who I even communicate that with, which is not a lot of people. But like, what would you have to say about stigma when it comes to just
loneliness and also someone who feels like they're being, like alone most of the time?
Yeah. I think maybe it's, going back to what you said of like who you share it with. And so do they have the right to hear that level of vulnerable information from you? And like, what are they going to do with it? So if it's someone that, maybe can't go deep and uses humor to deflect all the time, they might not be the right person to share that with, because they could use it as a tool. But if there's someone whom you do have a more one-on-one connection with, it's having that conversation with those types of people, because then you're actually going to be seen more than someone who isn't in that space, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And like this, like leads me to the final piece of this conversation is like, in the report, they talked about loneliness, isolation. It's a public health crisis, which is wild. And then it's been going up pretty much every year since the report came out in 2023. Now the current, like Surgeon General doesn't do any of that because they don't believe in any of the foo-foo stuff they call it. But like it's been going up like literally every year. And one of the recommendations they shared on the report is that we should treat social connection like a public health priority, which, I would love to get your take on that, as a therapist. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the increase in technology, I think the increasing polarization in politics and people going against each other and finding that if you're not on my side, I can't even have a conversation with you. I think that all leads to people being like, okay, I'll just stay home then. Right. And people can't be civil. It's really sad, but I think there's like a new Kansas City project where they're doing a lot of green space downtown. And I think that's beautiful, because what does that do? It draws people out and it causes them to walk their dogs. It causes them to exercise outside. And when you're outside, you get to make eye contact with people. You get to say hello. You get to potentially make a new connection. And so I think it's just getting out of your small little environments and being able to say like, I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to go meet someone, or I'm going to go volunteer at this place. And that's all I think would help add to just social connection. Right.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I genuinely look forward to that, because I used to live downtown and I moved. And one of the reasons why I got the apartment downtown is like the Palm Net apartment. I was on the highest floor because I didn't want to deal with anyone. But still, people would still come to the place. And I remember I would tell them, can you guys leave? In my case, is just intentional because my childhood has been chaotic. So I feel like that, finding solace in my own, alone time, brings me a lot of peace, comfort. I find time, to think about my life in general, people that are in my life, my kids, like things like that helps me navigate that. And when I say I am always alone, I have my wife and my kids, obviously, but like just the other people that are around me that sometimes can be very exhausting. But like on the public health piece, I do want to talk about one thing that, I read in a report that they talked about, which was as simple as just, sending a message to someone. Which could be, they call it a 5 for 5 connection. It basically means that every day for 5 days, you just write out 5 people that you haven't spoken to in a very long time. I love that idea. It's like you pick up your phone and you intentionally text someone. You use the social, tool that you have as a vehicle to actually connect with an individual. Just send a simple text by saying, hey, I just thought of you. And I wanted to send a message and say hi. And I hope all is well with you. You don't have to respond. I just wanted to just reach out. And usually when you do that, which I've actually tried, we did an event where I did that. And then, I at the end of the day, I ended up getting a bunch of texts from other individuals. And I had other people in the room that were saying that, hey, thank you for making me do that. Because I ended up having a lot of people reach out that I haven't spoken to in a very long time. Is there something that in your own realm as a therapist that you offer as like an advice when you talk to people?
I like that 5 for 5 connection. But I think part of it is maybe stepping out of comfort zone, signing up for something that it feels a little intimidating. But like we talk about different ways to get involved in the community or even in your local neighborhood. And like, when I'm talking about meeting other people with clients, like those are all suggestions I give. And for sure, if you're going to reach out to someone you haven't spoken to in a while, like that feels good for you. It generally feels good for the person on the receiving end. And so that's all just positive.
Right. And like, I know you're a therapist, obviously, but like, what can you say to a therapist or just individuals that are in the healing space? Maybe like an advice on like what to do when they find themselves in that situation. You're talking to someone who is extremely, lonely. I'm sure they're all trained to like do what they need to do. But like, how can they like integrate social connection in the work that they do?
I mean, you could invite other therapists to do consult groups. There's different Facebook pages for counselors and therapists, and they do like happy hours and get-togethers and put on conferences and stuff. And so it's putting yourself out there. If there's someone that you respect, it may be reaching out and saying like, hey, I love the way that you think, and I've heard this that you do, and like, can I pick your brain over coffee? Right. And like, know that you're going to get some no's. Or some silences, but also like that could be because they're too busy, but doesn't really have anything to do with you, but like keep asking. No,
absolutely. Like ghosting is something that I unfortunately used to partake in a lot, because I was just getting exhausted and bombarded with friends wanting to go do things that I'm not interested in most of the time. Because normally I find myself in spaces where I'll get invited to go to like a lunch or something, and then I'll meet someone else in that environment. And I guess they'll just assume that that's something that's like happens in my life a lot. And then they'll message me to come to something similar to that. I was like, no, I just happen to be in this space. But then, if it happens more than a few times, I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to stop. Is that a healthy thing to do for my own sanity?
I mean, I think communication is always better than ghosting.
I mean, I try to communicate. I'll send a few messages. Hey, I'm not interested. Hey, I'm not interested. But then it becomes like, I do not get it. Like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. And they're usually so consistent.
I mean, I don't really consider that ghosting if you've been clear several times about how you're not available. I don't know if it's the way that you communicated to leave the door open potentially.
Probably. Yeah. And so maybe I tend to be a nice guy too much.
So maybe there's a different way you could say it to kind of show that the door is actually closed and that future invitations, like that you're not available or something. But I do think communication is better.
But like, how do you say that? Like, how do you tell someone no, but like very stern? I do struggle with that a lot.
Yeah, I think you just be direct and say, hey, it sounds like you're doing some really great stuff. Unfortunately, at this time, I am not open to new opportunities, or I don't have the capacity to add any additional,
that sounds like very professional.
Or something to that effect, to where it's like
this season in my life.
But I mean, I think that's real, right? Like there are times when you're like, oh yeah, that sounds great, I'd love to come. And there are times you're like, I do not have room for that.
Right.
And I think saying something to that effect, they'll be disappointed, but that's okay, because you don't have to get in front of that. Like they're allowed to be that.
Sometimes I do hate disappointing people though, so that can be difficult.
Yeah, but it's okay to disappoint.
But like, to close this conversation, I want to talk about just like rebuilding trust and connection, especially in such a divided world. I had this idea about like a year ago. I wanted to introduce a bill which was going to make advertising or showing social media content to anyone under 14 would be considered as like, how kids in Africa are being sent to mines. Like that's the worst thing you can do, just to be able to protect, young kids getting exposed to all these ads that are literally guiding them to, hit buy someday. From the beginning of their journey on the internet, as someone who like work in advertising at such a high level, I get to see the entire customer journey. They will start, from a young age, advertising all of these different, concepts that can shape a child's identity. And one of the reasons why I left advertising, because I happened to be on this campaign. Now, I'm not going to say the name of the company because they will sue the crap out of me, and I was a former employee. But like, one of the things that I was in charge of was finding out a future generation what they may be interested in the next 10 years. And me and my team's job, we were researching that. So we would do a bunch of, like ads to like appeal to these younger generation and show them concept, and then see what they like. And then we would create products around that. And then to their parents, we would create, kind of like quizzes, really fun quizzes. Sometimes, do you want to know how your child looks like? Put your picture and this person's picture, and then you'll see what your child will look like. But that's giving us so much information as to like what the next 10 years of kids will look like. And I may be violating my NDA, but I'm going to say this indirectly. But like, toys, yes. So for example, so that we can figure out what superhero to create and which superhero to put an entire brand around. People that know me probably know what I'm talking about, but I didn't say anything. So if you want to sue, read the caption. But anyway, so like I actually introduced the bill, which was going to make sure that brands don't have access to that on the age 14 and down. But it didn't go anywhere because they're lobbying so much. But like, how can we make sure that we can build trust and like connection in such a divided time right now with ideas that I have in mind, actually having an opportunity? It's a very loaded question.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question is.
So the question is like, how can we rebuild trust and connection in a divided world right now?
Okay. And that's related to the advertising, or?
Well, that's just my own experience. But like in your experience as a therapist, like what do you think would be the best way? Since I know that things like what I'm trying to do will probably never see the day of the light. But like, what can brands that are watching this, individuals that are using those platforms, what can they do mainly on the brand side to build trust with those people? To not just harvest their data.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say it goes down to the individual level of like. Just enhancing connections, because I don't know how to get in front of a larger, I don't even know what you would call that, like organization's intent.
Right.
Because I think the only thing we really have control over are those individual components. And so it's how to rebuild or repair trust. I mean, I think communication is important. I think describing where you are with something and allowing the other person to do the same. It kind of goes back to how we're so polarized as like, are we willing to hear another person's opinion without becoming defensive?
Right.
I think that's part of rebuilding trust for sure.
I mean, it's a very like interesting time. And I happen to be someone who is very passionate about things that I write, and I put my ideas out there. And lately I'll write something and someone will make a comment that have nothing to do with that. And then I'm always so confused. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, did you even read it? Like, what are you talking about? Like the other day, I like did a piece on like, like watching my wife, like going to labor and the experience. And then I just put some reference and someone just like attacked me and said, you are here advocating for abortion. I was like, wait, what? Did you even read this?
Wow.
It was so it's like things like that are things that I come across. And I'm sure they were probably going to watch this video and be like, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I appreciate the conversation we've had, in the end. But, I was able to just firmly make sure that they understand my point, and which opened a gate for me to actually have a rational conversation with them. But 99% of the times, that's not the case. I don't know what I'm talking about. Which I'm probably sure I am at that point. But like, in my experience, I try to seek those 1% that are like actual people that are wanting to have that rational conversation and actually hear me out.
Yeah.
But like in closing, what would you say if, let's say you were in, at like a school assembly with a bunch of kids and you have an opportunity to like give them a message that could help them, be aware of bullying, be aware of the, the need to have balance between, human connection and also digital connection. What would you say to them as a therapist?
Yeah, I would remind them that like our words have an impact, and that they matter significantly. And so, when you're emotionally charged, be more aware of how your words are coming out, because you can't necessarily take back something after it's been said. You can always go back and repair, right? Like you can apologize, own it, and repair it, but it's always better left unsaid, especially if there's an emotional charge. So I would just remind them about how they deliver things, and then be aware of maybe what their friends are saying. And if they pick up on little glimpses of bullying, it's being able to hear them speak into it to some level, or just bring in an adult in that situation.
Yeah, I like that. And hopefully that adult is aware to hold space for them and be able to have conversation. But like in closing, I just want to say that, as someone who has always had people around me, I've always noticed that when I seek and share my story sometimes, because I'm very bold at sharing my story, and sometimes I can weed out or just identify who are the people not to share those stories to.
Yeah.
And I know that can be very hard for a lot of people to like have that rejection, but that's because I spent almost 7 years in therapy to make sure that I can handle that. And also I had my parents, specifically my dad, who just spent a lot of years to just roast me all the time. So I feel like I built that thick skin. But if you don't have any of that, just be mindful that when you share your story, you're sharing it just to identify something for yourself, not for other people.
Yes.
At least that's how I like go about things and like approach life, especially in this digital era where everything is so fast. You post something, you know, everybody sees it, or sometimes no one sees it and you feel like you're isolated. No one sees nothing you do, which can be a whole conversation of itself. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there because I can ramble about this. It's something that I personally experienced. I'm very passionate about it. But yeah, is there anything you want to say before we close out?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you can connect with any of this and you're feeling lonely, think about and look at your calendar. And are there things that you're saying no to because your calendar's too busy and that feels right? Or do you need to begin saying some yeses because you've said no for so long? Right. It's now time to begin to say yes. Or if you're not even being asked, it's can you go and seek out an opportunity that you find interesting and be willing to share a little bit about who you are and believe that someone wants and can be excited to meet you.
Right. Huh. I like that. And it's a good reminder for myself because I spend a lot of alone time by myself. Thank God I have a very extroverted wife who just takes me places. But if it's by myself, man, I'll be in the Tower of Power line with a long beard, just writing proverbs about whatever comes to mind. But yeah, if you're watching this, I want to challenge you for the 5 for 5 connection. Let us know how it goes. It's something that works for me. Just reach out to 5 people at least once a day and just see what you learn from that. It can be very beneficial just to get out of that bubble that I was held in. So, which sometimes I can find myself in. But yeah, again, thank you so much for listening and watching. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments. And yeah, you take care. Bye.